an Academy winner, and the former Vice President of the United States of America. Let's raise the roof for Al Gore. Woo!
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, Collision. Great. Thank you very much, Patty. And ladies and gentlemen, it's really a great honor to be able to share this time with you. I want to thank Patty Cosgrove and his entire team. This conference has grown, and not only in size, but in importance and quality, and it's a great honor for me to be able to close out this first day. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the sustainability revolution and the climate crisis. You'd be surprised if I didn't talk about that, and I'm going to. But I want to talk about not just the problems, but also the solutions, which are out there and they're available. And I want to acknowledge a couple of my colleagues who are here from Generation Investment Management, Anthony Wolf and Joby Godet. I understand that my good friend Christiana Figueres was here earlier, but she's gone now. I wanted to give her some props because she did a great job bringing about the Paris Agreement 2 years ago. And absolutely. So first, a word about Generation Investment Management. We invest in growth stage companies, private equity. We have a real passion for this. We invest through a sustainability lens, and our whole mission in life for the last 14 years has been to prove the business case that if you fully integrate ESG factors and sustainability factors more broadly into the investing process in every stage of it, you don't have to sacrifice returns. You can actually enhance returns, and the evidence indicates that is indeed the case. And there is a big movement in the investing community to try to be a part of the solutions for this ecological crisis, of which the most serious aspect is the climate crisis. We've invested in companies like, well, Proterra is the leading electric bus company in the world, and their CEO, Ryan Popple, is here today. Asana is a great collaboration online tool for knowledge workers. Justin Rosenstein, one of its preeminent leaders, is here today as well. We've invested in Gogoro, the best electric motor scooter company, and Mcopa, that puts solar panels on roofs in East Africa mainly, and others. We were an early growth stage investor in Nest and in Solar City, and we are looking for great companies that not only will perform well for all of their stakeholders, but also for the folks on behalf of which we invest money. So one of our passions is to be part of the solution to the climate crisis. And I'm going to say a few words about that before I talk about the sustainability revolution more generally. There are really only 3 questions remaining that have to be addressed where the climate crisis is concerned. One of them is, do we really have to change? Must we change? We still rely on fossil fuels for 80% of the world's energy use. Looks like it might be hard to make that transition, and so do we really have to change? Second question is just as important: can we change? Because if we have to change and we can't, that's just a formula for depression and anxiety, and nobody wants that. And the third and most important question is, will we change? If we have to, and if we do have the ability to change, we've still got to summon the political will to make the large-scale policy changes and technology and business changes and cultural changes, redefining growth so it's sustainable growth. Now, word of caution, when I talk about that first question, do we really have to change, I want to warn you in advance, and you already know this, some of the consequences of the climate crisis are a little bit hard to hear about because it's for real, unfortunately, and it's getting worse, and it's extremely threatening. But don't get depressed, because the answers to the second and third questions are actually extremely positive and optimistic and uplifting. They really are. So hang on. But let me deal first of all with that first question. Do we really have to change? Many of you know the basics of this. We are spewing really, 110 million tons of man-made heat-trapping global warming pollution into the sky every 24 hours. And truthfully, it's insane. And nobody really expected we would get to this point. But here's one thing to remember about why it's so crazy. The sky is not the way it appears to most of us when we walk outside on a nice day and look up and it seems like a vast and limitless expanse. As most of you know, it is an incredibly thin shell of atmosphere around the planet. If you could drive a car at normal speeds straight up in the air, you'd get to the top of the breathable sky in about 5 or 10 minutes. And the thinness of that shell is really important to take on board, because it means the number of molecules is way smaller than we might imagine, and the power of our civilization is such that we are now capable of radically changing the chemical composition of our atmosphere. And that turns out to be really important because it changes the radiative energy balance between our planet and our star. And by trapping so much extra heat in the Earth's ecological systems, it's messing a lot of stuff up, big time. And actually, if you look at the accumulated amount of all the man-made global warming pollution that's up there, it stays there for a long time, by the way, once we put it up there. Some of it will still be there thousands of years from now. But a spoiler alert, here's another quirk of the statistics of this chemistry. If we could magically stop putting it up there tomorrow, about half of it would fall out just over 20, 30 years. And so we can make changes that are extremely significant more quickly than the pessimists might lead you to believe. However, the amount, we can't snap our fingers and stop it tomorrow. It's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of work. But we're up to it. But the accumulated amount that's up there now, how much heat energy does it trap? It traps as much extra heat energy in the Earth system every day as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding on the Earth every 24 hours. Now just think about that for a minute. It's a big planet that we live on, but that's an enormous amount of energy. And when I say it's messing things up, I'll start with the water cycle, the hydrological cycle. And we all learned about this early on in school, of course, where the water vapor comes off the oceans into the sky and the prevailing winds take it over the land where it falls as precipitation, and then it rushes back to the sea in the creeks and the streams and the rivers. Well, all this extra heat, more than 90% of it's going into the oceans, and that is radically increasing the amount of water vapor going up into the sky. We've had a 5% increase in average humidity worldwide just in the last 30 years. That may sound like a small number, but trust me, it is really not, because these atmospheric rivers, or flying rivers as some of the scientists started calling them, bring that moisture over the land. And there's so much extra that when the storm conditions trigger a release, then much more falls at the same time. And so we get these rain bombs. We've had 14 once-in-a-thousand-year events here in the U.S. in the last 7 years. You're not supposed to have a once-in-a-thousand-year event every 6 months. But here in this city, of course, as everybody knows, Hurricane Katrina devastated this city. And not only because of all the extra moisture, but because of another factor that's getting messed up. When the oceans get a lot warmer, the storms that come over the oceans get a lot stronger. And Hurricane Katrina was followed by a whole bunch of others. And just last summer, anybody here from Houston, Texas? I wonder, there's some hands that are up. You know what I'm talking about. Hurricane Harvey dumped so much water in Harris County, Texas. Well, if you've ever been to Niagara Falls, if you imagine the full flow of Niagara Falls for 509 days, that's how much water Hurricane Harvey dumped on Texas and Louisiana, and a great big portion of it in Harris County. They had 5 feet of rain over 5 days, and it was an utter catastrophe. And then we didn't have to wait long for more, because then we had Hurricane Irma that devastated the Caribbean islands and devastated Key West, and then along came Hurricane Maria and devastated Puerto Rico. And by the way, to all my fellow Americans here, I want to say it is a disgrace the way we have abandoned our fellow Americans in Puerto Rico. They deserve better. And the decision to ignore them and they're still suffering is an example of what I think can fairly be labeled environmental racism. In any case, the people who suffer the most and feel the impacts first are communities of color, low-income communities, minority communities, because they can't defend themselves with the money and political power to keep the waste dumps from being put next to them, to move away from downwind of the smoke plumes, and they're in the low-lying areas frequently that are more prone to flooding. But in any case, Superstorm Sandy in New York City, they said it was ridiculous for the scientists to predict that the 9/11 memorial site in Manhattan would be flooded by the combination of sea level rise and higher storm surges and storms. But it happened, and now they're saying that used to be a once in 500-year event. Now it's a once in 25-year event. Within 15, 20 years, it's going to be a once every 5-year event. So most of you are, I'm probably the oldest guy here, but most of you I know are way younger. And what the world that you will grow into and successfully pursue your careers in will be shaped by the decisions that we make about this today. I talked about sea level rising. Well, that's another consequence. I went to Miami during a high tide and saw fish from the ocean swimming in the streets. And if you go around the world to places like Mumbai and Calcutta, not to mention these low-lying Pacific island nations and ones in the Bay of Bengal and elsewhere, you can go here to Galveston. And you can go to part of New Orleans, and a huge big chunk of southern Louisiana has already disappeared. South Florida, Norfolk, Virginia, the world's largest Navy base, is going to have to be completely moved. Annapolis, you can go around the world and cite these catastrophes that are unfolding. But that's not all. There was a report today from the Centers for Disease Control about the skyrocketing prevalence of diseases carried by ticks and mosquitoes. We've had tropical diseases moving to the higher latitudes, and we had that Zika scare, and it's not over with yet. And there are all these diseases I never heard about as a kid. Powassan, that's a new one to me. Now it's a big problem. Lyme disease, West Nile virus, chikungunya, the bone breaker disease. Boy, that sounds like one I don't want to get. But now all of us, and they said, the CDC says, well, one of the main reasons is warmer temperatures. Well, is it connected to global warming? Oh, we don't want to say that. Just warmer temperatures. Well, what's making the temperatures warmer? 17 of the 18 hottest years ever measured with instruments have been in the last, since 2001, and here it is, 2018. Of course it's connected to global warming, and the scientists have long predicted that it would be. Droughts. Right now, today, in the panhandle of Oklahoma, they've had less rain than they had during the Dust Bowl. There are hundreds of thousands of acres on fire today. Last year was the worst fire season in the history of California. and the U.S., and it's happening around the world. What about other creatures besides human beings? The average land, plant, and animal species is moving toward the poles at an average rate of 15 feet per day on our watch. Half of all the actual animals in the world are said to have been lost in the last 30 to 40 years. And half of all the living species with which we share this planet are at risk of extinction by the end of this century. Now, this is a good point for me to remind you that you should not get too depressed because I realize this really is hard stuff to hear, but it's reality. And we cannot give in to the human vulnerability that we all have to turn away from stuff that's hard to think about. But suffice it to say that the answer to that first question about the climate crisis, must we change, is yes. In fact, you could say hell yes. It's pretty dang obvious that we have to change. Now, second question, can we change? This is where many of you come in. The good news is we have the solutions available to us today. They are here. They are cost effective. We don't have to wait for some genius operating an R&D budget to come up with a magical new technological breakthrough. I hope they do. We could use some of them. But we already have solar power. We already have wind power. We have battery technology. We have electric vehicles. We have efficiency technologies by the thousands that are now beginning to bring about this dramatic change that we need in order to prove that we can solve this climate crisis. You look at wind energy, for example. Wind alone could provide 40 times of all the energy, all the electricity that the entire global economy uses. And by the way, it's expanding pretty rapidly all over the world. The best projections 18 years ago were that by now we would have 10 gigawatts or something. No, I can't remember the exact figure, but I know we've beat it 18 times over. In Texas, in parts of Texas, several of the utilities have a new rate plan because of all the wind energy they have. And the new rate plan is that from 9 p.m. at night until 6 a.m. the next morning, you can use all the electricity you want for free. Because it costs them more money to shut down the turbines than it does to give away the electricity. That's a pretty good deal. And we're seeing the cost continue to come down. What about solar energy? Even more exciting. 16 years ago, Bloomberg New Energy Finance issued the most authoritative prediction that by the year 2010, the world could install 1 gigawatt of solar electricity per year. 2010 rolled around and we beat that 17 times over. Last year, we beat it 98 times over. And the exponential curve is still going straight up. We're going to see, according to some analysts, 1 cent per kilowatt hour solar electricity by the end of this calendar year. And if you don't speak kilowatt hour, that's about a quarter of what it costs to make electricity from burning fossil fuels. And this is a global trend. If you take the 4 top emitters of global warming pollution in the world, China, the US, the European Union, and India, all 4 of them got the majority of their new electricity generation last year from solar and wind. This is a global trend. Since 2010, global investments in renewable energy crossed over and exceeded the investments in fossil fuels, and the gap has been growing year by year by year. And it's continuing to bring about this massive energy revolution based on renewable, non-polluting energy. You know, when you cross what they call the grid parity threshold, grid parity is just a way of saying that's the line below which unsubsidized solar, for example, is cheaper than electricity from fossil fuels. Well, when you cross that line, that's not a minor event because when you have a competition between an incumbent technology and a new technology reaching scale, there turns out to be a big difference between whether it's more expensive than the incumbent or cheaper than the incumbent. And when you cross that line and it gets much cheaper, then it's Katie bar the door. You're going to have a continuing radical change. I'm very excited about this. We're also seeing, I mentioned batteries. We saw the largest battery in the world installed by Tesla in South Australia a couple months ago. Now other firms are trying to outdo them and build bigger, better, cheaper ones. I wish them all well. This makes it possible to use solar energy at night more effectively and wind energy when the wind isn't blowing. In fact, we've had such changes in the energy sector that that's no longer the biggest source of CO2 emissions here in the US. It still is in most countries. Transportation is. But that's where the electric vehicles come in. Electric buses. Within 7-8 years, more than 90% of all the buses in the world are going to be electric. Now, that statistic is dominated by the onrushing changes in China, Chinese electric buses in China, but it is a harbinger of things that are coming all over the world. Electric motor scooters, electric vehicles. Every major automobile manufacturer in the world is switching to electric vehicles. The R&D budgets are no longer going to extra tweaks on the internal combustion engine. They're competing for the electric drivetrain and to make the best and most marketable electric cars and trucks. I'm excited by that too. But let me tell you that more important than all of those things is this larger sustainability revolution that is based on the new digital tools that are available now, the Internet of Things, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and others that are now giving executive teams in many sectors the ability to manage electrons and atoms and molecules with the same precision that the IT companies have used to manage bits. It has the scale and magnitude and impact of the Industrial Revolution, but it has the speed of the digital revolution. And it's changing everything, and many of you are a big part of it. So thank you for what so many of you are doing. Well, let me just give you one quick example. Google has the biggest server farms in the world. They use a lot of energy. They bought the AI company DeepMind, Demis Hassabis and Mustafa Suleyman, and they asked those guys to take their AI and apply it to the server farms. So they did. And what happened is no changes in hardware at all. Increased output of processed information, but a 56% decline in energy use just from more highly precise management of the electrons and the BTUs. Now, they had an advantage because they had a big, rich data set that Google's been compiling on all those server farms deep and wide, so they had something worth applying the AI to, and they had teams that knew how to derive the insights from it. But there are thousands of use cases where this same kind of transformation can take place and is taking place. So, can we solve this crisis? Yes, we can. It does involve changes in policy, though. We are still in the world subsidizing. We're seeing taxpayers forced to subsidize the burning of fossil fuels at a rate 38 times larger than the meager encouragements for renewable energy around the world. There again, that is literally insane. How are we going to stop that? Well, one thing I just want to be sure to say, please register to vote and turn out at the polls in this election coming up. I don't care what party you're in or if you're in a party at all. I'm not here to make a pitch for the party I've been in most of my life, but I want you to pay attention to what these elected officials are doing and let them know if you disagree with it, not just by complaining, but by going to the polls and getting your friends to go to the polls and sending a message loudly and clearly and speak up, win the conversation. Think about those high school students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. They're real heroes to me. They're eloquent, they're determined, they're ferocious, they're persistent. Now, the investor community has an enormous role to play. I mentioned at the start, Generations had the mission of trying to prove the business case that you fully integrate all this stuff, you can get better returns. Why do we want to do that? Well, we want to do it for our clients, but we also want to put pressure on the entire investment marketplace to move in that direction. For too many years and decades, some asset managers and investor advisors have said, oh, I would like to invest in a way that makes the world a better place, but I have fiduciary responsibility and it won't allow me to do that. Well, now the academic research and the experts have homed in on this, and they've turned that on its head, and they're now beginning to say the best practice is if you don't fully integrate sustainability, then you're violating your fiduciary responsibility. Now, this is investor talk, and I know that that's a portion of this crowd, but I want to talk directly to the entrepreneurs who are here and the startup executive teams who are here. And I want to say this to you. I'm not here just to give you information. I'm not here paid to be here. I'm not paid to be here. I'm not here to try to entertain you. I'm here to recruit you. We need your help to win this struggle. We need your help to solve the climate crisis. And I've looked at a lot of the business plans represented by the teams that are here, and I know that many of you are already doing that, and I would like to say thank you very, very much. Now, the third and final question, first, must we change? Yes. Can we change? Yes. Will we change? Well, one reason I am here to recruit you to be a part of this effort is that answer's not in yet. I believe we will, and there's some encouraging signs. As Christiana no doubt told you earlier today, the Paris Agreement was a really historic breakthrough. It really was. It's not enough, and she'd be the first to say that too. But every nation in the world agreed to get to net zero by mid-century. That's a hell of an accomplishment. Now, I know what you're thinking. Trump. And he did make a speech last year and said he wanted to pull out. But here's what a lot of people don't know. I was part of the group that helped draft that agreement. Under the law, international and U.S., the first day on which the U.S. could legally withdraw from the Paris Agreement happens to be the first day after the next presidential election. And if there is a new president, excuse me for a moment, then nothing partisan about that. No rule against prayer at collision. If there is a new president gives 30 days notice and the U.S. is right back in. We are making progress. We have to do it. We can do it. I'm convinced we will do it. But the business community and tech entrepreneurs especially, keenly aware of what's at stake, knowledgeable about these new tools that can be used so productively and hopefully and efficiently, you can play the crucial role in making sure the answer to that third question, will we change, is in fact yes. I wish all of you the very best with your businesses, with your investing, the people who are here for whatever reason. I hope you really get what you're looking for out of this conference. But in closing, please hear me not just as a speaker, but really and truly as someone who, if I had the ability to transfer directly what's in my heart to yours, I'd want you to leave this conference just fired up with enthusiasm to help solve this climate crisis. So much depends on it. And by the way, for anybody who doubts that we have the will to change, just remember that the will to change is itself a renewable resource. Thank you, and enjoy the collision. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. And thank you to this man. He's a true inspiration to all of us.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.